I want to take one brief moment and ask a quick favor. If you enjoy the content of the XM podcast, please hit the subscribe button to keep up with new episodes as they are released, and give us a comment if any of our episodes have made an impact on you. Thanks so much for making this podcast go global and reach those who are looking for a little encouragement, education, and most importantly, more insight into what it means to live a Christian life during difficult times.
It's the XM Podcast with licensed mental health therapist Matthew Kanabe.
So why do we work? Why are we having this conversation on a podcast that focuses on mental health and faith? Well, because most of us work. And the amount of time in our life spent in the workplace often exceeds much of the other things that we allocate to pursue in life. Therefore, many people's stress, anxiety, depression, joy, and drive come from what they do. Some find their path early in life, others it takes several tries to find their spot. Some people may never find their thing. I'm currently in my third career, and I'm totally okay with that. But I think often work can be tough, frustrating, out of balance, and lacking purpose. To help unpack that, I've asked a dear friend of mine who has been working with CEOs, companies, and many organizations for years to help them find their sweet spot and thrive. He is someone I deeply respect and who has been massively successful in this space. Please welcome to the show my dear friend, Jeremy Pietrocini. Hey, buddy.
Hey, man.
How are you?
I'm good.
Man, we had a great lunch.
It was a good lunch.
I love that place.
Always full.
Always full. I don't. We should have
finished the fries.
We should have scheduled a nap before we started. So, dude, let's start here. As you and I were just kind of praying, it dawned on me, I've known you probably for 33 or 34 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound...
That means we're old. Yeah, high school. I mean, I don't know when in high school we were.
Well, I met you guys my freshman year in high school.
Okay.
So you and Jay would have been freshman, sophomore year of college. Mm-hmm. So I did the math real quick. I would have been about 15. Okay. Which would have been about 33 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm super excited to spend time with you this whole afternoon. We've made a day of it.
Block our Friday.
That's right. Which is great. So first and foremost, for our audience, because I know who you are.
Yes.
They probably don't. Share a little bit.
Do I know who I am? Is that really?
Yeah. I'm going to give you an opportunity to share therapy. Who you are.
Yeah, that's right. Help me discover.
How do you feel about this, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Share a little bit about.
Yeah. So, Matt, you just mentioned Jay, but kind of our good friends, and we were all involved in Young Life. Actually, your parents were on the Young Life committee.
Yeah.
I still have funny stories of your dad just making us laugh and committee meetings and stuff. But yeah, so yeah, we've known each other, grew up in Hudson, Ohio, but through that Young Life journey and kind of just where God took me on a path, I had the privilege to be on Young Life staff for a stint and then work at a church, which never saw myself as a Kent State University grad working at a church. I'm like, that's not a seminary,
right? In
case you were wondering.
Yeah.
But it was really fun because I had the opportunity just to focus on leadership development, which is what I feel like a lot of we were trained to do through Young Life is help people discover who they are, believe in themselves in different ways than maybe a lot of these high school kids do. Sure. And then went on to work for an organization called Gallup. Mm-hmm. Which some people know the Gallup poll, and they've got an assessment called Strength Finder, which actually is designed to help people just kind of tap into some of their God-given talents and strengths. So had the privilege to do that for 2 decades, and in that journey kind of moved a couple of different places, but got to move back here to Northeast Ohio and reconnect with you and Amy and all that. So,
and now... Full circle, we're on Young Life Committee together.
Yes.
Because we're old.
Yes, we are old. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so you launched a new company with your son.
Yeah.
Not quite even a year ago. Talk to us about Recreate, and then we'll kind of get into our discussion today.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joseph, my son, is 26. He would tell you from the time he was 9, I think he was 9 when I brought home the first iPhone, and he had all these questions, was intrigued, he sort of indirectly as a 9-year-old fell in love with business, and he's like, wait, who is this Steve Jobs person? What does he do?
Yeah.
But he also, at a very young age, and I mentioned Young Life and then the church, faith was also an important part of Joseph's life and my daughter Emma's life and our family. And so he loved watching how I saw my sort of mission, my call with my job at Gallup is to be in front of leaders, help them rethink the way that they lead. And although Gallup does a whole myriad of things around workplace engagement, they do well-being studies of what makes people happy and healthy on the planet. My call and passion, I would say, kind of what makes me most alive is coming alongside leaders to help them think about how they can reshape culture. Mm-hmm. And so when Joseph was probably 15, he came to one of these big Gallup events with me. I was emceeing an event, and there were probably 3,000 people, and mostly independent coaches, consultants. And Joseph actually said as a 15-year-old, Dad, we're going to start a business someday. And I'm like, that's great, but you and your sister want to go to college, and mom likes living in a house and stuff like that. So, but I didn't really see it at the moment of like, all right, let me just quit my job and start, like, love who Gallup is, what they do, and what they impact. But when just over the last couple of years, as we continued to just pray about this, we knew it would be a someday thing, but not knowing when. And we, for a long time, had that name, Recreate Work. And to recreate simply means to make new again. You think of it as the root word for recreation. So typically not what we do during the work week, it's what you do on the weekends. Right. But to breathe life into, actually, my wife Jill well, but she started her interior design business. I think it's been 6 or 7 years now, but it's Recreate Home. So where we just started a year ago with Recreate Work, her business is Recreate Home. So same thing, how do you breathe life into homes? Mm-hmm. Our passion, and it's a joy to do it with my son, but our passion was to launch a business where we get to breathe life into work. Yeah. So Recreate Work.
You and I had a really great conversation over lunch, and a couple points I was like, man, I wish we were actually recording. We should have brought this stuff to the restaurant. But you started talking about work. Yeah. And I'd love to hear your concepts around the idea of work, why we work, some of the perceptions or maybe even unhealthy ideas about what work is, why we do it, and why it's also important. And then I just threw a lot at you. Yep. But also,
they teach us to ask one question at a time.
Yeah, I don't
ever do that. But I'm not
a professional
in coaching and in counseling. Yeah, that's right. Don't stack questions. Or
yes. But then there's a biblical
I'm with you.
aspect to the whole thing. Yeah. So let's just talk about work for a little bit.
Yeah. So it was interesting too, because early on, Joseph and I and we pulled in some other guys to help us kind of revamp everything we wanted to do with the business. So from the name of it to the website. And at one point, and as we were creating the design, just little gear, like you think of the on your phone or anything, when you go into settings, you get system settings, you're like, that's where you go in behind the scenes for the work. It's the stuff. And for a lot of people, the whole idea of work, there's a crazy stat, and you can Google it on your own, but it's like 80,000 plus hours of our adult life is what we'll spend at work. Mm-hmm. So when you think about your awake hours, it's a huge amount of our adult life that we spend at work. So for a lot of people that are like, hey man, work sucks, it just is what it is. If I could scratch off the lotto ticket, wouldn't have to go to work. Yeah. Two things. One is just Gallup data when they show, in the most recent polls, 80% of people, so 8 in 10 would say work sucks. Mm-hmm. The thing that Gallup has also discovered is it doesn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. That if leaders, managers, people who influence, because for most people, by the way, when they say, if you said, ask your neighbor or friend how it's work, and they're like, oh, it sucks, I'm glad it's Friday. If you ask them why, they're going to say two things. One, they'll start to talk about workplace culture. Mm-hmm. So the culture is just not great, or it's change, or whatever. And then the second thing they'll talk about are leaders. Mm-hmm. And so this whole idea of saying, okay, so are leaders the problem, or are leaders potentially the solution? And so when we think about work, we're like, if that's where we have to spend an absorbent amount of time, like, could it look different? Could it feel different? And part of what you and I were starting to talk about at lunch is, even when I've had this conversation, and Joseph and I are both very optimistic and hopeful for work doesn't have to suck.
Right.
You can actually do things where you go home happy and healthy, and there's data and research on that. And I think you and I both at different parts of our career, we're like, there's days it's hard and challenging and it's work or labor. And there's other days where you're like, that work felt like fun. It felt like service. It felt like something I was doing to benefit others, and actually came home more alive. And so that's where, I know at lunch we were talking about this too, but where some of my Christian friends will say, dude, I know you guys want to change the world. I know you want to make work great, but it's work. And it's work because they'll go back to, Genesis and the creation story, and they'll be like, bro, by page 3 of my version of the text, we screwed the whole thing up, and work is our punishment.
Yeah.
Work and labor, childbearing labor. You're like, not children who work, but when women deliver children, the labor, the pain. So, but what's really interesting is you actually go back to Genesis 2, I think it's verse 15, but that was pre-fall.
Sure.
God had created everything, which, by the way, he worked for 6 days and then he rested.
That's right.
So he worked.
Yeah.
So work wasn't bad. Work was actually something. He created us in his image as creators. And then he commanded Adam and Eve to work, like to work the land. The Hebrew word is abad, is the verb. Abodah is the noun of work. But those two words translated are very simply worship, service, work. And so I think sometimes we have, in our modern day, we separate, especially for people of faith, like, this isn't new, a lot of us have talked about this, but where worship is something we do. I listen to some worship songs on my ride to work, or I went to church on Sunday, that was work. Or service, I volunteered on Wednesday night at Young Life or whatever.
Sure.
And the reality is, we're like, no, this whole idea of work, what we do with our hands at work, at home, can actually be worship and service.
Yeah.
The way it was intended to be.
Yeah.
So
we'll be right back.
Are you exhausted from carrying it all and realizing something has to change? What if 4 days could give you the clarity and breakthrough that normally takes 6 months of counseling? The Soul Care Intensive Program is open to anyone ready to do deep, focused work. In just 4 days, you'll complete comprehensive assessments, receive 8 hours of therapy, a follow-up report of the sessions, tools, and aftercare options, all in a distraction-free environment built for real change. This experience is especially powerful for couples working through marital strain, communication breakdowns, or years of unresolved tension. If you're tired of surviving and ready to get unstuck, don't wait. Check out emerge.org/intensives today. A Soul Care Intensive is for you when waiting is no longer working, because staying the same is no longer an option.
So what do we do with the concept of work? Because you had mentioned earlier, chances are most everyone has to work.
Yep.
There might be a few anomaly situations, but it would be very rare for someone to say, I've never worked a day in my life. Right. So I'm sure there's somebody, we learn in therapy.
Although I've met some people, you maybe have too, who actually go to an office, get a paycheck, and have never worked a day in their life.
That's also
we call these bad employees.
Right. We learn early in therapy, you never say never and you never say always. Yeah. But with that being said, the idea that in prior to the fall, we are designed to work.
Yep.
I also think that there is something about self and the good part when we are doing good things, and work is a part of that.
Yep.
Now, I also think that identity it's a dangerous thing. Like, we don't want our identity to be wrapped up in work, but it also is a part of who we are. There's a balance within that, Talk to me a little bit just about how do we navigate those types of struggles? And when you're coaching CEOs and companies, like, how do we shift the mindset from work sucks? What does it look like to start to be aligned with, this is more than work. It's more like a mission. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're hitting on a couple things, and one that I'll touch on is, and it's some other research Gallup did, and it was when they studied people on the planet, so 7 billion plus people on the planet, they look at overall quality of life. And when they look at the people that are happiest and healthiest, you've obviously got the blue zones, and you can do the research on it, of where are these places at, what do these people do differently. But Gallup found 5 core elements and they call it well-being. So living a thriving life. So they look at people that are thriving, people that are struggling, or people that are suffering. So sometimes you're like, I just got this job, if I get the next job, you're in that middle bucket, but you're like, how do I thrive? How do I feel like life is firing on all cylinders? And they found 5 things. Physical. So there's a physical well-being piece. There's a financial well-being piece. There's a social well-being piece. So do I have friends and family that I love? There's a community well-being piece. Do I like where I live and, feel safe where I live? And then the 5th one is career well-being. And then they actually, in one of the publications, so there's a book on well-being, but they've updated some research every few years on it. They actually rebranded career well-being as purpose. And they were like, for people who are retired or not in school or not in a career, but it's a sense of purpose. Now, what's interesting with both career and purpose and the integration of that is they actually found that what we do for a living is so important because it drives those other elements. Our financial well-being is often driven by that sense of, well, what do you do for a career? Where I live or where I get to live. I was in Mexico City, and this one part of town that they told me don't go out of your hotel without a driver. But we drove by this beautiful neighborhood, and I'm like, it's got walls and barbed wire, and I'm like, is this like a prison for wealthy people? And they're like, no, that's actually a super nice neighborhood, but people can afford to live there, and they can afford security to keep them safe. And so they're like, they let their kids walk around the streets and whatever, just beyond. But it was their jobs that enabled them to create safety in the midst of what typically you would think is not safe. So you look at how our career well-being impacts all those other areas of life. And so this sense of mission purpose with what we do, there's a lot of us that I think, and this is true with leaders I speak to as well as employees or just people that are working anywhere, is I think a lot of times we've lost that sense of purpose. So work is a means to an end of, I need to make money to survive. Instead of, we go transactionally into work, get the paycheck, cash it, go home. Instead of, am I at work to serve? Am I at work to accomplish something? Am I doing something meaningful with my hands or my brain or whatever it is that I'm doing? Am I doing it in a way that actually brings life to others? And I think that's where, especially for people that are listening that are followers of Jesus, like, we're called to serve, we're called to give, and not in a way where we become doormats, but is it more what the Apostle Paul talked about in Romans 12 or 1 Corinthians 12 as to, am I a hand, am I a foot? Like, what part do I play? Like, you are a musician, and when we're traveling with the band, you're like, do I know the part that I play? Because if I decide I'm walking out today and I'm going to play the drums, your drummer's looking at you, and your drummer's looking at you going to get off the set. Like, this is not what you're made to do. Yeah. And so one of the things we talk about a lot in the workplace, again, both with leaders and with their teams, is, do you have clarity around your what? Like, what are you called to? What do you, and it can be broader for people, like, what are you on this planet to do? But there's a sense of mission and purpose with that. I know Simon Sinek calls it why, and you got to start with why. And I believe in the why and the onus for that, but I think sometimes that clarity around what, and you and I have talked about this too, like even those old name tags that still exist at times, and I try to avoid them in social settings, but when you're like, hello, my name is, I came across one a few years ago, and I have a slide of it that I use in presentations, but it says like, hello, I am. And it's not just like, what's my name, but like, am I a teacher? Am I a counselor? Am I a consultant? But I think there's something that, and we can unpack this too. There's an unhealthy onus that we put on our what I do and the doing part of our humanity. And we miss the being part of humanity. Like, who am I called to be? Yeah. One of my mentors at Gallup, Kurt Leesville, and he passed away, but he was a person of faith, and he was adamant about, Gallup's strengths assessment to help people discover their strengths. But he said, we've got to realize as human beings, there's a being and a doing, right? If I say I'm a teacher, but I don't teach, then you're missing something. If you say you're a dad, but you actually don't parent well, so if you say I'm a child of God, but you don't represent that, there is a natural doing piece to who we are at our core. So there's a lot in that, obviously, of like, for some people, they don't know what they're called to do. They have these labels that they put on themselves, like their I am label is I'm a screw up, or I'm a, and I remember you and I have talked about that, where a talk you gave where it was like, tell yourself that 10,000 times. Yeah. Just what you'll believe. You go to work going, work sucks. I'm a servant of this person. They don't care about me. Your whole day you will feel that way. Yeah. So
when you're doing and you're, working with organizations, and I'm assuming they're bringing you in because they're needing direction. It's very similar to me. Like, I can assume when a client gets to me, something's gone wrong. Right. You don't bring the therapist in when everything's going well. So I've already assessed, without even meeting the person, they've probably exhausted most of their resources in trying to fix the problem, and they couldn't. What are some of the problems that are brought to you? What are some of the things that you're seeing? If you were to generalize, most of the issues that people run into, what are some of those? Yeah.
So in the workplace, and I say workplace, but some of the work we do, and this is both through Recreate Work, and Gallup is in the space too. It's for humans. So you're like, whether you work at a school, whether it's a nonprofit, faith-based organization, even just cities, communities, like all these different places that people might go to work. And so when we're brought in, there's two primary things. One is, it's interesting because in the coaching space or the consulting space, I do think, similar to counseling, people are often reaching out because there's a problem to solve. Right. Within organizations, when there's a problem, it's, hey, we have a turnover issue, or performance isn't what we need it to be, especially in publicly traded companies. If they're not growing at the rate they want to grow, they're like, we need something different. In manufacturing environments, it's safety. Like, hey, we have safety. So anything, and what's interesting with some of those big issues is you can quantify them. Businesses can quantify them from a dollars and cents perspective. So in hospitals have a metric of accidental sickness and death. You may want to check that your local hospitals. This one's higher. You might drive past 3 hospitals before you get to it. Right. But they know that when their nurses, doctors, caregivers, even the people that do, billing and all that, when they're more engaged, when they're showing up happier and healthier, more alive, more alert, that they can actually reduce those number of accidental sickness and death. Those nurses aren't just overly tired. They're paying attention and extra attention. The custodians are taking extra care to clean and dispose of things in a proper way. So that's true in manufacturing. Like, when people are happier and healthier, like, the quality is going to be done right. It's where, when people deeply have this sense of caring about their work, there's just a better outcome that you begin to get from it. Yeah.
So if you were to imagine somebody who's in a role that they're not enjoying, they're not getting the fulfillment from their job, but maybe they're not the leader. How do they engage in that versus how somebody who is a lead pastor or a CEO, somebody in leadership, there's a dynamic difference. So what are your thoughts around, because essentially I think the theme of what we're talking about is finding joy, purpose, drive, regardless of where you're working, coming from a Christian perspective, it's all ministry.
Yep.
When you're not feeling that, where do you go with that?
We'll be right back.
LPC, LPCC, IMFT, LISW, PhD. If you don't know what any of those are, go ahead and hit the 30-second fast forward button and enjoy the podcast. But if you know someone or happen to have those credentials, then Emerge might be your next career path. If you're seeking to join a team that provides authentic Christian counseling and utilizes advanced modalities, then apply today at emerge.org/careers and join us in the battle to help people find freedom and rest.
Yeah. So, and I love the question because I think it's the onus for change. As anybody who's listening and is in a leadership role, they have the ability and even the responsibility to change things faster. Right? A new CEO comes in or a new lead pastor comes in, they can change things, boom, like that, for good or for bad, by the way.
Sure.
When we sometimes as individuals just sit back and let things happen to us, I think we're actually missing huge opportunity to create the life that I believe we're called to live. And Jesus talks about living life to the full, and that's why he came. Like in our own personal lives, on our weekends, we don't just sit back and be like, oh, I wonder what's going to, you're like, if you want life to be full, fun, whatever, you decide that, you do something with that. And it's interesting because I think even in personal growth, somebody that chose to listen to this podcast, they're not just sitting back and letting life happen. They're saying, okay, I want my life to look different. Now, you asked the question a moment ago, why do companies bring us in? And I mentioned the number one reason if there are issues. The second reason is we're actually performing pretty well, but is there anything we can do to take it to the next level? Mm-hmm. And I think you hear that, and both those buckets are true with personal development. Somebody has a problem or an issue and they're struggling in their marriage, they're Googling and they're listening to podcasts and they're reading books and they're talking to friends to figure out like, what can I do to be a better husband, or like, what does that look like? Yeah. And so they're in some ways doing it out of desperation because things are bad. In other ways, it's, I've got a good marriage, but I want it to be even better.
Right.
And what does that look like? And I think that's where, for individuals, I use the analogy often, and I use it with leaders, but I think it's, again, a message for humans. And I might use this example because I travel too often most weeks and I'm on airplanes, but no matter what part of the world you're in, what airline you fly, they always tell you the same thing before the plane takes off. They say, in the event of an emergency, if the oxygen mask drops, secure your own mask first, then help others. I've done some work, by the way, with Southwest Airlines, with some of their leaders, and I told them, I said, thank you for injecting humor. So if you've ever flown Southwest, our kids were real little. Again, they're now 23 and 26, but our kids were little. We were living in Omaha, flying to Philly to see family, and we flew Southwest. And I still remember to this day, the flight attendant said, in the event of an emergency, the mask drops, secure your own mask first. If you have more than one child, pick the one with the highest earning potential. So our kids looked up, panicked. We're like, don't worry. There's two of us. There's two of you. Right. Hopefully both don't go for the same kid at the same time. But that whole thing of like in life, we sometimes, even in that analogy with your kids, you're like, oh, I got to help them. We've got to start with ourselves. So even in that workplace, you're like, oh man, I need my leader to read this or do this. Or you're like, nope, it starts with me. So pausing to think about, what can I do? Do I have my own sense of mission and purpose and clarity around my what at work? And I unpack that too with leaders that I'm coaching. I'll say, once you know your what, you need to dig deeper into your why. Mm-hmm. Why really do you do it? And then ultimately your who. Who are you doing it with? Because in some settings, you know your what and your why, but you're a fish out of water. You're like, I am called to be a nurse, but the health system I'm at, the way they're doing things, I just don't fit here. Like, okay, then find that place where you fit. Yeah. And so I think as individuals, when we can pause to think about, and I've done this throughout my own career, am I thinking about my own personal development? Am I reaching out for, talking to coaches or counselors or friends about the things I want to get better at? By the way, I've yet to see a professional athlete. So if you watch the Olympics or watch any professional sports, I know you enjoy golf and watching golf. I've yet to see a professional athlete that doesn't have a coach. Mm-hmm. And by the way, a lot of them have coaches and counselors, and in some cases, again, it's not because they're broken, but it's because they're saying, if I address the things in my life where I'm getting in my own way, what can I do to actually take that performance to that next level?
Yeah. I love that analogy. It reminded me, when you think about like even a football team or a baseball team, not only do you have a head coach,
not the Browns.
Well, they probably need more. They probably need a few more. But it's like every division has a coach. You know, you may have multiple coaches,
right,
being on, you know, whatever team. So I'm going to throw this question out because I'm interested to see how you'll field it, and you know, and I don't mean to go down this rabbit hole of you know, whatever futures, but AI is happening. So
yes.
Like we're in it. It's moving, and I've read a lot of reports that within, like, they're talking like 3 to 5 years, a lot of the workforce may be eliminated.
Yep.
So this is more of a projective question, just your thoughts on it, because you live in this space and you've worked with so many organizations. And what happens to people if they don't have work? Because what we've already defined is work was not something that God punished us with after the fall, but it was something that was assigned to us prior to the fall that is a part. And this isn't like, oh, AI's coming and the world's going, you know, to hell in a handbasket. But I just wonder what would happen to the human condition if all of a sudden so many things were automated that less and less people were needed for the jobs that we have today.
Yep.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
But I'm just interested because I think it's such a reality that we're living in.
Yeah. There's two elements to it. One is I'm of the space to believe that although AI will replace a lot of jobs that humans currently do, I actually think there will still be a lot of jobs for humans to do. So I don't think it's and I know there's some people faced with that right now. Like, no, listen, I just lost my job and I can't find a job. Like, I get that. But same thing with, you know, technology. You know, I heard somebody recently say it used to take 20 people to plow a field and horses and walk, and then the tractor replaced 20 jobs. And you're like, wait, it didn't just create unemployment. They found other things to do. Right. So I think there's a place for humans in the future with AI until AI takes over everything. Yeah. The part though that you're hitting on that I think is actually really profound is if, again, even though we win a lottery ticket, now I don't have to work.
Right.
It's really interesting, and I've seen this both with family members, friends, other people. I see it with a lot of senior executives that almost can't retire, or when they retire, it's really hard to just sit still.
Yeah.
And again, because the moment we sit still, the moment we stop moving, our bodies even begin to deteriorate, and we're like, there's something about life that we want to stay busy. And the number of times I hear this from retired people, they're like, I don't know, I was so busy. They find things to do.
Yeah.
And they're in that, there's a sense of, they're trying to find a sense of purpose, fulfillment, that career purpose, well-being element of life. And so that's where I've been blessed. I don't believe the line, by the way, of, you know, do what you love and you never have to work a day. And I'm like, no, that's
I don't think that's true
falsity.
either.
That's not true.
I mean, I love my marriage.
Yeah.
But there's days it's work.
Yes.
It's a grind.
Yes.
And no one's paying for us for that.
Yes.
But it's, I mean, I love my kids.
Yeah.
There are days where it's like, this is work.
It's work.
Yeah.
And even Gallup's research around, you know, one of the core questions around workplace engagement is simply worded, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day at work?
Yeah.
It doesn't say all day, every day. So if you helping solve a really tough personal problem for a human, you got to do that once today.
Yeah.
And they said, thank you, Matt. Like, this changed me. Like, you're not going to do that for 8 hours of your day, but there's still paperwork and emails and other things you got to do. But that does something where, and you know how the brain's wired way better than I do, but that does something where in our hardwiring in our central nervous system that you are more alive because you got to help be a part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, when we think about word design, the other word I use a lot, and obviously in our business name of Recreate Work, to create. So if we were created in the image of a creator in order to create, right. I think for some people that's where, not their quote unquote job, but their hobbies of, and some of it's artistic, of painting or music or other things. But for some people it's like, man, I love working in my yard. My grandmother she had this huge garden. And I mean, it was probably 50 feet by 30 feet, and she loved it. And she lived into her 90s, but until she, was not able to, live in her house and take care of the garden, she would be out there all the time. To me, that looked like work, like not work I wanted to do. Like, if you want to punish me. For her, it was life-giving. There was something about that actually brought her joy. Yeah. And I think that's where, when we can discover, what am I called to do? Again, there's school teachers. My daughter just graduated from university, and she is going to be an English high school teacher. And when you ask her about it at 23 years old, her eyes light up. Like, she feels like, I can't wait for this. Now, ask her again, after the first semester. Yeah. But you see people in their careers where they light up because of what they get to do. And I think that's where there's a lot of jobs that we need humans to do, that humans are like, man, it's where you're like, let AI do that job and find something that actually brings you life or brings you joy, or that you really do feel at your core that you were called and gifted and made to do. I think,
I remember watching a documentary, and this was a long time ago, but it was like a documentary on all these people that won the lottery. Yeah. And it wasn't good. No. None of the stories turned out well because essentially all of them, and these were all like big winners. Like this wasn't like, they all retired themselves. They all went on these spending sprees, and probably for a couple months we're living the life. But and they did a dozen of them, ended in this tragedy. And I look back on my life, and I talk about it a lot. Probably the most difficult time was when I knew I was done with the music industry. I really had to grieve that. But then there was a period where I was lost. I was like, what am I going to do? And I don't know that I was in a clinical depression, but I remember being at church, and a friend of my dad's, he was a very direct guy, kind of gruff. He was like, if you don't find a job, you're not going to have a reason to get out of bed. And it offended me. But I look back on it going, he was right. Yeah. It's like, you need that thing to kind of go, I'm interjecting something in the world. I'm doing for a purpose. And, I just wonder, I think a lot of times I'll talk to people, and they're just counting the days down to retirement. And so that's what they're working for. And it's like, I think you're missing a huge part of life. And I listen to tons of podcasts, and I've heard, again, not to go down the AI route, but, a lot of people suggesting that we may be moving to this utopia where AI takes over and we don't really need to work anymore. And as a mental health therapist, I start going, I think depression might be on the rise then, because then you're losing purpose for, entire populations, I was listening this morning to a different podcast, and the guy was talking about the AI as it's probably similar to most new technology. He's like, everything in this regard is like a knife. And what I mean by that is a knife can be used in surgery to repair and heal somebody. It also can kill somebody, and I remember I was working with a client years ago, and we use a therapy called IFS where you kind of name your parts. And I remember a part that he was struggling with and dealing with, and he called it the sledgehammer. And what do we use a sledgehammer for? Breaking walls down, tearing things apart. And we were able, through therapy, to shift that sledgehammer into a hammer. What does a hammer do? It builds things up. And by that simple shift of that part of him, he was able to newly identify a part that was destroying his life to start actually building back to it. But I asked that question because I think, when you meet somebody, where are you from? What do you do?
Yep.
I think those are whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, it is kind of who we are. And it's like, what happens if the answer is, well, I'm Matt, I don't really know where I'm from, and I vacation.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I haven't done anything in years. Yeah. I've got a friend, and you know him very well, sold a company years ago, and in his early 40s could have retired. And I remember just being shocked that he was like, dude, first off, I'm 42 years old. How in the world could I retire? What's going to motivate me to get up in the morning? And he's like, I've got 3 kids and they're little. I don't want them to see their dad not work.
Yep.
What does that then teach them? It's some interesting concept, I think.
Yeah. It's a little bit, and I'm sure you've got all kinds of insights on this from a, kind of mental health, the way our brains are wired perspective, but we tend to think in this utopia of, if I just had that. And so there is a little bit of if I didn't have a job, if I had unlimited wealth, if I had, and part of what in my own journey of faith and life and marriage and career, what I've discovered, and I should have figured this out at a very early age, but when you were talking earlier about joy and peace and love, those things aren't actually found in any material thing on this planet. Even as much as I love and adore my wife, and we just celebrated 29 years of being married, and she's my best friend on the planet. It was actually very healthy early on when she and I, and it was actually some friends of ours who were part of a church we were part of, and they really helped us to be like, hey, our job in a marriage is not that we need or depend on the other to make us happy.
Right.
If we find that, again, for people that see the God of the universe as the source of all things, you're like, when that's my source, then it's my loving and serving and giving to my wife is that additional, me being able to give that. It's not coming from something she gave me. I've already have it. My cup is full and overflowing. And the same is true when she's feeling that. But our then love for each other is it's an additive effect, not the thing I need. And so I think that's where for so many people, when they're like, if I just had this job, or if I just had this career, if I just had, and I think if we actually pause to be like, oh wait, and it's the simple, process of just being grateful, gratitude, you're like, oh wait, I have a job. Mm-hmm. So for the 26-year-old that's like, but I just want to be running this company, you're like, hold on. First of all, you have a job. There are people all over the planet who don't have jobs or don't have look at it from an income perspective of what are you making and what are you driving. If you're driving anything, you have a car, you have a place to live. There are people on the planet who don't have that. So when we start from a place of gratitude and we don't show up with entitlement or I need or I deserve or you're not doing it right, because there's a lot of people in the workplace that is every single day of
sure.
They come to work. They're miserable, and you know who they are and you avoid them. When we show up, regardless of where you're at in stage of life or career, we show up with gratitude. There's something different that begins to change. And I think that's where when we then see whatever the job is, I work at the toll booth and you're like, okay, and how many people do I get to smile at?
Yeah.
And say thank you to, or someone might be super rude. You're like, but if we truly live as salt and light and we show up in places to serve and to give and to love, what's crazy is the amount of joy, peace, happiness that I feel in those moments. It was actually the giving that allowed me to receive. So you're like, when we can enter into that in what we do for work, and we can begin to tap into a love and the scriptures where it talks about delight in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. And you're like, so desire is not bad. Even my own heart's desire isn't bad, but it's when it's connected to, because it can be bad when it's connected to,
definitely can be bad.
When it's connected to delighting in the Lord, you're like that like, all right, Lord, what is it that you have called me to do? And I think that's where there's some people that feel like, well, if I didn't have my job, then I would do this thing that I love. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's not. And I heard somebody say this. Actually, it was a book I recently listened to, John Mark Comer's Garden City. Mm-hmm. And the book was written in 2015, but I felt like, wait, was he on our website? Was he looking at recreate? It was like the website did not exist then.
Yeah.
But he was just talking about this whole idea of from Genesis to Revelation, this call of humanity. And one of the things he talked about is he's like, I think people think heaven is sitting, either it's just singing all the time, or it's an eternal vacation.
Right.
And he's like, I think when you read what it is, and even when the scriptures talk about a new heaven and a new earth, from the beginning, we were called to work and create and make things. And so you're like, is heaven actually not just this beach with singing and...
Yeah, I don't think so.
It's not, and he said it this way, and I like this word on it. He said it's not vacation, it's vocation.
Yeah.
Are we doing something in heaven with people and with God that makes us come alive? Are we creating? Are we doing? And that's where you're like, all right, so Jesus talked a lot about kingdom here and now. And we're like, do I just have to wait someday to be in ho hum, go to work? And I'm like, or can I begin to do useful things with my hands now?
Right.
That truly feel like it's my vocation, is my calling. It's something that's life-giving to others, so they go home happier and healthier, and we're creating better lives for our kids and our neighbors and our friends.
That's good. Have you read Heaven by Randy Alcorn?
Yes. Yeah.
It sounds like he's pulling a lot from that.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that we're going to this paradise and with harps and I think, I just wonder, and I love that Randy uses...
As a musician, that doesn't excite you?
No, not the harps.
Too many things.
The concept that he uses is we're experiencing pre-life and we're moving to life. We need to stop thinking of it the afterlife, because his point is he thinks we're going to have a more physical experience than we're even experiencing now.
Yep.
And I think it's so important. And I wanted to touch on what we'll wrap here in a minute, but I wanted to touch on the idea of wanting life to be easy and moving towards retirement. And I think those things, rest is good. God shows us that. Yep. But some of the greatest things that we have experienced as mankind have come out of adversity.
Yep.
Like, I remember being in the music industry, and we put out a record, and all of the reviews were like glowing. And I'm like, oh crap, this isn't good. Like, I don't think we nailed it. Like, you got to be pushing against something, especially creatively and artistically. And I know in my life, I've been the most motivated when it's been the most difficult.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like, I think a lot of times, like I've got an image in my mind of a guy that I worked with that was so fearful of failure, he didn't even do anything.
Yep.
And it's like, if the enemy wants you anywhere, it's there.
Yep.
Like the fear of failure, some of the greatest things that we've ever experienced in mankind, the movement of culture and society, has come out of failure after failure after failure. And it's like, I think sometimes we have to be okay with that. But I don't know. We've moved into this new era, maybe over the last, 20, 30 years, where it's like too fearful to take that risk. But I think what happens is then you become complacent.
Yep.
And you start to enter into fields and workplaces where it's like, well, this will be easy. And then you end up a year or 2, 5 years down the road, miserable.
Yep.
You know? And so there was a question I had asked earlier about that person that maybe's not in the position to change things. And I wonder if they entered into a position where they were like complacent.
Yeah.
And just kind of going through the motions and going, well, I checked in, I checked out, and here I am 25 years later. And I don't know. It's just a thought that kind of
I think we give up. We sort of settle for, yep, this is as good as life's going to get. This is as good as the job's going to get. And I think what actually is happening, again, whether it's I know there's leaders that make you feel like, nope, this is as good as it's going to, like your pay is maxed out.
Yeah.
But when one of the models we use is helping leaders to listen, love, and liberate. And to liberate people, to truly give them freedom and autonomy to bring their whole self to work, to be who they were created to be. There's an element in that too, just for the person to say, like, do I feel this sense of freedom, or am I being really controlled by what you just said is fear? Mm-hmm. I don't want to ask for the raise, or I don't want to take the risk to leave this career and start something different. And that whole idea of fear, I believe you're absolutely right. The enemy loves it because it keeps us trapped, and it keeps us small, and it keeps us not living life to the full, because we're like, nope, you don't get that now. You get that someday. You're like, no. Again, when Jesus talks about kingdom here and now, there's something about, do I need to wake up? And the writers of scriptures talk about that. There's even, I love both, in the Hebrew scriptures where it talks about this valley of dry bones, and and you're like, are we actually, as humans, do we show up to work more like robots? Mm-hmm. And even in the way we talk and the way we interact and the, hey, how's it going? Like, there's even now some AI bots that the way they go, good morning, Jeremy. It's like, right. I'm like, wow, they're more friendly than my actual colleagues, So have we as humans actually just become these robots and zombies, and we just show up to work and we just punch in, punch out. We just have given up and become complacent. And I think that's where I love that when, Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, he just, reiterated and quoted the Hebrew scriptures, but saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart. Like, he doesn't say like some of the time, but it's like all your heart, all your strength, all your mind, like this. Are you all in?
Yeah.
And I see it all the time. I know you do too, but you can go to a friend's house for dinner and you can be like, that person's totally distracted. They're checked out. They're on their phone. Mm-hmm. They're barely alive. They're not all alive. And again, yes, there's days you're tired and you're exhausted and you got kids. But I think what can transform us as humans is when we actually tap into, the source of all life, where we go, I am fully alive and I want to live fully alive today. And even going into my work day, like, God, how do I actually show up fully alive, regardless of what my job is, if it's my dream job or just a job? But how do I go in fully alive where people see that? And I think when we begin to lean into that and live that, others admire it. So I've seen in certain times, in certain settings, even one of my promotions that I had in my career, it was a 2-day event with a bunch of salespeople, and the guy who runs it was like, hey man, the energy you brought, he didn't say you're so smart, you've closed some really big deals. He was talking about the energy I brought, which I would just talk about my vibrancy for life and humans. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad I was on that day, right? But I think that's where, when we actually begin to dream and to pray about, Lord, what do you really want for me, for us, and not just, again, a someday, but a here and now. And when we begin to wake up and we live life fully alive, fully charged, fully plugged in. I'm working on a book, and there's a chapter on aliveness, that leaders live like they're alive. You look at them and you go, they're not just robots. That's a human. Yeah. And there's an energy. They bring this sense of aliveness. I think it's one simple characteristic that if we actually lived that out, people would want to know, Matt, what are you doing different?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, man, there's so much truth in that. There was a interview I was listening to with a Christian apologetics perspective and a agnostic. And I appreciate that he said he was agnostic, saying, it's not that I don't believe, I just don't know what I believe. And the apologetics perspective, the problem with the conversation, it was an interview that I wasn't a part of. I was listening to it. I wanted to jump in because he was trying to cognitively share something that's experiential. Like, I can sit here and tell you all the great things about Jesus. I can tell you about all the things that, but until you experience that, we can sit here till the cows come home. But there's something to what you were just talking about. It wasn't about how smart you were. It wasn't about how many sales you had. You brought an experience. You brought this thing that people could go, oh, I want to be a part of that. I can't define that. I can't define for me or you the way you experience transformation in Jesus Christ cognitively. I can sit here and tell you, well, it was this day and this happened. But as you listening to that, you'd be like, well, that sounds really great. But what does that mean to me? Yeah. But I think you can see people living that out and you go, wait a minute. And you start watching a little bit closer, and then you start doing your own investigation, and then you start trying to figure out who this guy Jesus is. And all of a sudden you have a moment where you experience the Holy Spirit and you go, whoa, wait a minute. Well, I can't sit here and I can't tell you about it, you know? But I think that's the problem is too many people want to hear, you know, well, how do I fix this or how do I change this? And it's like, well, because you and I have been talking about this experiential thing quite a bit lately. Yeah. And I think it's a cornerstone. And I think it's also something we kind of maybe got away from that I think probably since 2020, you know, going into a pandemic where we weren't really experiencing panic and separation. I think people are seeking out and trying to find more of those types of things. And I also think we're seeing an uptick, especially in younger generations, of people going to church, where a couple of years ago it was dipping, but all of a sudden people are going, wait a minute, you know? I just think it's a really interesting concept that also plays into the workplace as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we can experience life in the midst of the mundane, we just, again, even on our drive to work, do we notice the birds and I know people that live in Denver, and I'm like, dude, just seeing the mountains. They're like, oh yeah, I forgot they're there. You're like, what?
Right. Yeah.
You're like, how do we wake up to the experience of it all? One of my buddies who's battling some depression, he sent me a TED Talk, I think it was, that he listened to, and he's like, gosh, this makes so much sense. And it was a you know, kind of a licensed counselor, this dude who does a lot for good for people, and he actually even found himself battling some depression, and then he said he started traveling the world and giving more time away, and he said he got to a certain region in Africa, and he just said, I want to volunteer my services to help, you know, people that are maybe depressed. And they said, oh, Westerners have actually made us worse instead of better. So we appreciate
Great news.
We appreciate you, doctor. And he said, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm not charging you anything. I just want to help. He goes, well, what we found is they would try to fix us by taking us into a dark room all by ourselves and talking. Right. And he said there was no community. There were no drums. There was no sunshine or nature. And we did not understand. So it was like, wait, and not that, again, talk therapy or meeting with people. And sometimes, again, we're sitting in a dark basement, right? You know, but there's all around us, everyone, unless you're stuck in a prison cell in solitary confinement, there is life all around us that I think sometimes we just are asleep to it instead of awake to it. Yeah. And when we can, your word, experience it. Yeah. When we can think about those moments in life where you put the kids in the car and just go do something, or you think about going to camp. We talked about Young Life early on. Yeah. Like, the whole idea was for kids to leave their phones at home and go experience something. Yeah. Because we're lost living in this world where we're on our phones trying to live through somebody else's life with hopes and dreams of, oh, if I had that. You're like, no, if we were just alive and experienced what's around us, I just think, gosh, every moment.
Can you talk about the valleys? Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah. My brother and we had breakfast a couple weeks back, and he just said, hey, you remember we were part of a faith community, and he said it was just a bunch of guys were together in this, you know, had some time just kind of challenging each other. And he said one of our good buddies, Ted, asked us to do this activity, and he said you drew a line that represented like your life from childhood to current state. And he said, and then you draw like a little, like a heart, what is that, like a cardio deal,
peaks
like
and
ups
valleys.
and downs, peaks and valleys. And he said, go, just think through your life, and, you know, highs and lows. Some are going to be really high, some are going to be really low, some just little. But he said, and then identify what were those moments. And I think he used the language moments, like what happened. I got this job, or I got my favorite guitar, or I met this girl. And what was interesting is everybody, as they were sharing those out, my brother was like, I still remember, and it was probably like 12 years ago that he did this, but he said every one of my peaks was an experience. It was, I remember going to Young Life Camp, and it was transformational, not just for my faith, but with some of my friendships that are still, you know, transformative to today. And I remember, kind of, these different experiences that didn't happen behind closed doors. It wasn't, I bought a new car, right? You're like, but they were experiences. There was something that happened. And again, experiences, they can happen alone, but oftentimes they happen with others, the sense of community. And I would probably argue for me, my experiences alone were not really alone as much as they were with God and with nature, where you're like, there was something that happened in community with their creator. And then there's something that happens with other people. And I think that's where somewhere in life we stop having experiences and we stop living and we're just existing. Yeah. And I think if we can recreate, no pun intended, but if we can recreate,
it's a great tagline.
That's right. If we can recreate those experiences, it's like, imagine just, again, waking ourselves up, having those moments. I think we try to do it as adults through vacation and other things, but again, we sometimes take our technology with us and we come back from vacation needing a vacation, and we're missing the opportunity to truly be fully alive.
Dude, so good. Man, I appreciate you so much. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap?
No, man, I'm grateful for what you're doing, and I just think there's so much. I love that people are talking about mental health and just life, and I think the really interesting Gallup data point was that one of the things, even though we're in 2026 with technology and social media and we're essentially more connected than ever before, I can talk to somebody or see them on camera and the other side of the world right now, even though we're technically more connected, that one of the Gallup data points shows that isolation, loneliness, depression, as you know, is at an all-time high.
Yep.
And you're like, what is it that there's something wrong?
Yeah.
And so I think unless we talk about it, unless we lean into it, unless we together find solutions, the world will continue. Like you said, with AI and other things, the world will continue to trend that way. Yeah. But I believe the more we're talking about it and thinking about it, one of my favorite passages in the scriptures, Romans 12, don't conform to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I think the way that we have the ability to create change for self and others is to rethink and to begin to just do that, not in isolation, but together. So,
well, dude, I have enjoyed the last couple hours of experiencing community with you, and man, really appreciate you and this conversation.
Yeah, you as well, man.
Well, any chance I get to hang out with my friend Jeremy is a joy for me. We touched on many topics around work and what it can look like when we are aligned with our gifts, ministry-minded, no matter where we are working, and how work is not the result of the fall, but a part of the plan the whole time. You might be right where God wants you. Or maybe you're someone who's listening and feels stuck and needs to seek some coaching, counseling, maybe some mentorship about what might be the next step for you in working towards a place for you to make an impact and utilize the gifts God's given you. Well, I hope this has been a blessing to you. Well, until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless. In a world where life can feel overwhelming, there is a place in the greater Northeast Ohio area where people find peace, hope, and healing. Emerge Counseling Ministries. For over 50 years, Emerge continues to be a trusted faith-based counseling center offering professional mental health care with a foundation in Christian values. Whether you're struggling with anxiety, depression, grief, or simply feeling stuck, our licensed counselors are here to walk alongside you. And the impact speaks for itself. 97% of our clients say they would recommend Emerge to a friend. 98% say they truly felt understood and heard by their counselor. And 84% report that their issue is improving through the care with us. At Emerge, you're not just a case number, you're a whole person. And we are here to support your journey towards healing and growth. It's confidential, compassionate, Christ-centered care. Learn more or schedule an appointment today at emerge.org. That's emerge.org. Remember, you don't have to walk alone.